Hello, and welcome to story time. Your ability to interpret the story. A lot of, especially microeconomics, but any economics class you're going to take, especially when you get to more advanced classes, they're going to expect you to look at a situation and interpret it correctly. So I'm going to read a story, and then I'm going to go through my thinking process about how I'd interpret it and how I'd answer the question. I think this is the hardest part of economics. Sometimes the math isn't even that hard. It's just extrapolating what's important from what you've just read, and that can be the most difficult part. Let's get started. Consider a risk-neutral, profit-maximizing firm that produces output Q from input X using the technology Q equals the square root of X. It is possible to obtain X from two sources, either directly from a primary supplier or from a secondary supplier, retailer, who purchases it from various primary suppliers and has a big warehouse to store supplies. Primary suppliers charge a price P and are prone to supply disruptions. English is hard. Prone to supply disruptions, whereas secondary suppliers charge a price R and deliver the input with 100% probability. That's important. Let alpha, in between 0 and 1, denote the probability that a primary supplier will deliver the input. A firm is required to order and pay from the input before a supplier delivers the input. If a supplier does not deliver the input, he does not compensate the firm. The price of output is normalized to 1. In what follows, let X of P and... I'm going to say that again, sorry. In what follows, let X, P, and XR denote the quantities of X bought from primary and secondary sellers, respectively. Okay? Suppose the firm can order from a primary supplier and from a secondary supplier. Write down the firm's expected profit in terms of RP alpha, XP, and XR. So, it looks kind of like this. We need to write a profit function in terms of R, P, alpha, X of P, X of R. Okay. And I can note that Q is equal to the square root of X. We're making a profit function. Okay? Profit is usually equal to income, money in, less expenses, money out, okay? So let's look for this stuff, okay? First thing I'm gonna do is reread this whole thing. I'm not gonna do it right now, obviously, because that would take too much time, but I always reread stories because I tend to benefit from rereading them. But immediately I'm seeing Q equals the square root of X. This right here is their utility. So this is like saying, this would be akin to saying their utility equals square root of X. So this is their product, this is what they're getting, and this is their usage of it. So now I want to find what they're paying for here. Okay, so in this case, let XP and XR denote the quantities of X bought from primary and secondary sellers. So P, I'm going to write primary here. Primary. Denote the quantities. This is a quantity here. Primary, secondary. This is quantity. We also need to look at this probability as well. So, but we can already start the story, okay? So we know we've got, let's say, probability alpha. Yeah, let alpha denote the probability that a primary supplier will deliver the input. So this is when it happens, and then 1 less alpha is when it does not deliver. Okay, so alpha, we know that the product is being delivered, okay? So alpha times square root and then what they're buying. Yeah, X P plus XR. Because in this case, both have successfully delivered, and then less price times, it would be price times the quantities. Okay? So in this case, it would be less P XP less R XR. Okay? So I hope that makes some sense. This is the relative price to how much they've bought, and this is their utility of what they've bought, and this is the chance that the primary supplier is following through. I'm going to make sure that's right. So that's correct so far, and I hope it makes sense. The reason we've put both XP and XR under the same square root is because this is their X. This is their X. You're not supposed to separate your X. The only way you can do it is, well, I'll show you, because this is going to be 1 less alpha. So this is when they're not following through, or when the primary supplier is not had a supply disruption. So it's 0 plus X of R less PXP less RXR. Okay? So you're still having to pay the primary. Okay? So obviously, because this is a 0, I can just take out the 0, right? So you're left with this, and this is your profit function. This is your profit function. Your profit is equal to alpha, bracket, square root of XP plus XR less PXP less RXR, and bracket plus bracket 1 less alpha, bracket, the square root of XR less PXP less RXR. And again, I just want to make sure that's right. Yeah, that is correct. You can take it one step further though, which is really, really cool. Yeah, okay, so this is important to note. So this is correct, however, it can be more correct. Alpha plus 1 less alpha is always equal to 1, because either this happens or this happens. So, because this is happening on both sides, you can actually just do alpha, profit equals alpha, square root of XP plus XR, plus 1 less alpha, square root of XR, less PXP less RXR. Okay? Because this happens in every single situation. So it is just one of each. And these situations are unique to their probabilities. These are not. So that's why you're able to take them out. And I believe that is our final that is our final thing. Yeah, they didn't put as many brackets around these, so they don't have a bracket here. I don't know if that actually changes anything, but this is correct. But I believe the hardest part, because if I looked at it long enough without checking my notes, I would have been like, oh, wait a minute, because I know that rule, and then I would have fixed that. But the hardest part was reading that story, reading that paragraph, and thinking like, oh, like what actually matters here? Like they were talking about some sort of like warehouse at one point, and they were talking about like other, like it's going to sound like a lot. And then you need to think, okay, it might not be so complicated, because this isn't even a difficult function. This is pretty simple, but it's about looking at the story and being able to go, okay, I see what I'm supposed to do here. Let's start. And you might get it wrong. Like you might get it wrong, and then look at it back and like try to analyze it. Be like, okay, well, does that actually make sense? Like, would that actually be correct? So there's no shame in getting it wrong a few times. I highly suggest for advanced economic courses, reread the story like 3 times because you're not going to get it right on your first try. If you get it right on your first try, then you are much smarter than I'll ever be. Takes me a few times. But, all right, thank you for watching.